Welcome back to the Real Intelligence Podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Swim, and I'm so glad you're here today. Lately, I've been thinking about pain. And before you end the podcast, I recognize that nobody likes pain. We don't like discomfort. We don't like the unknown. We don't like to feel unsure. We don't like any sort of pain inflicted, whether it's physically, spiritually, emotionally, socially, mentally. None of us like that. Perhaps you not only don't want to feel pain personally, but you don't want to offer it to another. Maybe you struggle to fire someone or to give difficult feedback or to discipline a child or break up in a relationship, even though you know that it is a better alternative, that it allows for growth, that it allows for progress. Pain is an interesting concept as we consider it along our journey of real intelligence. Pain is part of this environment that we live in. It's something we have to experience as we navigate this journey. We feel it in ourselves personally. We experience it in the world around us, and we have to find this way to relate with it in a way that's healthy and that doesn't shut down our system, but that still keeps us safe and allows us to progress. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about pain, how we might view it, how we might look at it or approach it, and of course, some practical tools we might use to engage with it when we experience it. I want to, from the outset, just offer a theory here that pain allows us to progress. Pain helps us expand our capacity. It does something within us. It carves out within us greater capacity to do something we couldn't before. We've talked about on this podcast several times that in order to find that magic, if you will, find that aha, find that breakthrough, find that next step, we have to step out into a place of risk or discomfort. And oftentimes this is synonymous for some people with pain. Other times we're going along our merry way and we have something that kind of runs into us, if you will, that we didn't expect, that we weren't choosing to take a risk on, that stops us in our track and brings pain, again, in multiple different ways. Today I want to invite you to consider that pain strengthens us, that pain expands our capacity, that pain increases our compassion, that it changes our perspective, that it opens new opportunities. Now, if you think about all of those things, at least for me, I say, well, great, like that sounds like a really good thing I want to have, but yet we avoid it. We instinctively avoid it. In fact, if we define pain, I would say pain is something uncomfortable that we have an instinct to avoid. So if it really does, and you'll have to decide this on your own, but if it really does open these other opportunities for us, if pain really does increase our capacity, our compassion, our opportunities, it strengthens us, then why do we avoid it so much? And what might we do differently? Now, I'm not going to answer all those questions because that's up to you to decide how you see pain, what your relationship or your philosophical understanding is about pain. But what I know from my own experience is that pain is part of our mortal sojourn. It is part of our process of progression. And as such, understanding it and maybe even shifting our perspective about pain a little bit might help us navigate with more intelligence than before. Years ago, my friend shared some really interesting feedback with me. She told me that I was in bubble wrap and I needed to come out of my bubble wrap. That was such an interesting feedback offering to me. I sat with it for a long time and really pondered, like, why do we even use bubble wrap? Well, typically because something's fragile and we want to send it on a journey through the mail and we don't want anything to happen to it. And as I sat with this concept of bubble wrap, I thought, I can see how I wrap myself in this protective space in order for me to avoid pain in my journey to where I'm going. It's common for us to have one of four responses when we have pain that comes into our life. Number 1, we fight. 2, we run away or flee. Number 3, we freeze. Or number 4, we fawn. This is common. This is like studied and measured in people across cultures, across ages and time, that is a natural response because we are trying to preserve ourselves, keep ourselves safe in that journey through life that we're going on, that metaphorical journey that I'm having in my bubble wrap as I'm being shipped somewhere, right? We know that we're going to get tossed aside. We're going to get mishandled, that we might even get dropped. And we want to make sure that we preserve ourselves as well as possible. I recognize that that was something I was doing with myself. So how might I look at that journey, recognize the drop, the tossle, those things that probably will happen in my life, and have maybe a different perspective on what that means instead of that item being shattered and irreparable? How might that item become even better from those experiences? Now, please don't hear me wrong. I'm not advocating any sort of unnecessary risks or not living from a place of wisdom and anchored virtue, but I am offering that life sometimes gives us things despite our best efforts that we didn't see, that we couldn't have prepared for, that are deeply painful and deeply uncertain or unknown. And so how do we navigate those places in a way that is intelligent, that is anchored, that is aligned, that is wise for us? So first of all, let's define pain, and then we'll go back through our common responses. I'm personally defining pain as discomfort that we seek to avoid. Now, it could be physical, like we touch a hot stove as a child. It could be mental, where our thoughts were just really cycling around with self-deprecating thoughts or worry. Number 3, it could be social, where we feel snubbed or we feel not part of the group. It could be emotional pain, where we're feeling really uncomfortable feelings like shame or embarrassment or guilt. Number 5, it could be spiritual, where maybe we have a sense that something isn't right, we do it anyway, and we feel that rub in our internal landscaping that says, I'm not aligned. This wasn't the right thing for me to do. We can feel pain in all of those ways. So what are our natural responses? Like I mentioned, fight. We can feel anger. We can go toe to toe. This looks like criticizing. It looks like barbs, whether that's physical or verbal or emotional barbs that we respond with to someone else or to a situation. Flight, that's our second one, where we avoid, we build walls, we pretend that something's not there, we don't look at it, we might even numb. The third one is we freeze. This often looks like just overwhelm. We might struggle with decision making. We just feel shut down. We don't know what to do. We don't know the next step to take. And the last one is we fawn. So this one is where we people please, where we socially work to help others around us feel a certain way, to perceive us a certain way, so that we are safe and we feel less pain. Oftentimes, when one of those 4 responses is present, we can observe, hey, there must be some pain here that I'm experiencing. So what do? We know what pain is. We know our common responses to pain. What could we do when that pain is present? The first option is to name it, to really discern what is that pain. So if I give you an example of Emma, she was at work, she put her heart and soul into this project. She got feedback that it just wasn't quite there. It didn't land with her boss. It didn't land with the team. They wanted to go back to the drawing board and start again. So Emma's natural response was to flee, to run away. She decided, I am going to avoid any sort of risk taking. I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to deal with this. I'm just going to go back to my desk. I'm going to just go back to the drawing board, give them the status quo, send it to them quietly, and kind of pretend like this never happened. That was her natural response. One option, when she recognizes, hey, I'm running away, this isn't comfortable for me, I acknowledge that, is to name the pain. So what about that experience, getting this negative feedback or this feedback that her best effort didn't land? What about that was painful? Maybe it was that she felt embarrassed that now they're going to have a different view of her. Or maybe it was that she felt like she wasn't good enough. Here she gave her best and it wasn't enough, so something's wrong with her. Maybe it was her effort wasn't received. Like here she'd given so much and they didn't even acknowledge the effort, even if the outcome wasn't what they wanted. So really to pause and define what is the pain that I'm experiencing in this situation can be really helpful. That's the name it to tame it principle that Dr. Dan Siegel talks about. When we're able to name what we're experiencing, our brains release that soothing neurotransmitter. A second thing we can do is change perspective. So if we take a third-party view, so sometimes it could be called like an airplane view, where we really pull back and observe from that 30,000-foot view of what's happening. Oftentimes this perspective can give us a little different clarity. Perhaps we notice some growth about ourselves. Perhaps we have some wisdom about a situation. Perhaps we have some recognition of, hey, I've done something similar to this in the past. I got other feedback from a high school teacher that I failed a paper, and this is what I did back then. So we're able to navigate it differently. The pain can be separated from the suffering, which is the neuroscience that some studies are showing recently, that we can separate those two, that they're not necessarily the same thing. That our brain actually has a painful experience or an ouch experience, but then there's also the sense that our brain is making about that experience that can cause the suffering or the additional pain. So she could pull back and expand her perspective. Okay, and the last tool, if you will, that you can play around with is to feel it, to lean in and feel the pain. I think one of the most common experiences that I have watched people go through when it comes to pain and discomfort is the common desire to stuff it, to minimize it, and to move on from it. There's an interesting book I came across a few decades ago called Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. And this book theorized that if we don't process through something in the moment, it will show up in the future for us. That's part of completing our cycle of learning. So how do you do that, right? If it's something we're trying to avoid or we're not comfortable with, how might we lean into and feel it a little bit? So when that pain starts to show up, one, we've named it. We know what the pain is. Maybe I'm a mom who's come to the end of the day and I'm making dinner for my family. And all my kids tell me how much they don't like what I've made, and my little one decides not to eat it. I've had this experience, so I know I felt frustrated with this, right? And I've tended to go toward fight, where I'm really angry, or freeze, where I just shut down. I just feel overwhelmed and I just shut down. Once I identify, okay, pain is here. What is the pain? Well, maybe for me, the pain is feeling rejected. Like I gave you a gift of trying to create a nice meal for you and it wasn't accepted. It wasn't received. And that hurt me. So if I name it, that's part of it, right? If I take that view and I step back and I look at the perspective, I can recognize, okay, these are children. They're not emotionally mature and they're just going with their immediate response to what tastes good to them. And if it's not a candy bar, or some sugar, it's probably not their favorite thing at this stage in life. They're not appreciating a cooked vegetable the way I'm appreciating that. So I have maybe a different perspective shift. Then I'm sitting with it. I'm recognizing it still feels uncomfortable that my gift wasn't received. So I need to sit now with that part of the pain. I need to notice, hold that in my lap, sit across from that. let that be in my living room if I don't want to sit too close to it. But that I can recognize how it feels. I can notice the discomfort in my body, notice the discomfort in my mind, the sensations I might be feeling, and perhaps breathe through that. Maybe I inhale that discomfort and exhale it back out again. But that I give my body a way to process that versus just soldier through it, pretend like it doesn't matter, move on, push it down. Oftentimes in our culture, we see that as a sign of virtue, that we just don't feel pain and that we move past it. That's not typically how we progress, grow capacity, grow compassion, grow opportunities and strength, right? Stopping to sit with it allows us to move to that next place. Let's bring this back to you. What is the pain you might be experiencing in your life right now? Just one thing. If you could put some words on that, what would they be? If you could pull back to a 30,000-foot view and watch yourself in relation to this pain, what would you notice? What do you see? And what does it feel like to sit with this pain, to let it be at your dining room table with you, to let it sit on the couch with you for a moment? Just observe. Notice that intensity that you might be feeling. And breathe through that intensity until it starts to loosen just a little bit. Pain is part of our shared human experience on our road to progression, to growth, toward the goals that we have and the desires of our heart. Pain often shows up as an uninvited guest. But it's been my experience with myself and with others that as we recognize pain, as we relate with that pain and process through that pain, we find ourselves stronger, having more capacity, more compassion, and having progressed on our own personal path toward what matters most to us. I hope this episode provided some nuggets that might be helpful for you as you navigate things that are perhaps unexpected or undesirable, but that hopefully move you toward that greater place of purpose. If you found this episode helpful, I'd invite you to pass it along to someone else who might find similar benefit. Thanks so much for joining me, and we'll see you next time.